Hello everyone, welcome back to week 4. I can't believe we are almost halfway through the Scrappy Spring Sew Along. So this week we are kind of continuing with our English paper piecing blocks and our 9-patch blocks, and we're working together to make this library nook quilt. So I'll show you mine once again. This was my sample that I made, and I am working on a pink and green version this time. So I heard from a lot of you last week that you are loving English paper piecing. You're loving this process, which makes me so happy. Whether this is your first time doing this or you're seasoned at this, English paper piecing becomes so relaxing. I love doing it in the car, on road trips, on the couch, like while my kids are watching a movie. Anyways, I'm happy to hear that many of you are loving this, but I've also heard from many of you like, now what? So that's what we're going to talk about this week. How do we take these hexagons and these larger blocks that you cut and turn them into some of these squares here, some of these blocks here. So what I want to do first is talk about how we can prep our hexagons and also our squares for applique. So we're going to be appliquing these onto this as the background. So the first thing you need to do is you need to remove these papers from the back. So if you have thread basted, all you need to do is just pop them out. If you glue basted, which is what I did, it's a little bit more tricky, but certainly not hard. So I'm going to actually flip the camera around. I'm going to be using this hexagon flower today, and I have removed all the papers but one. So I'm going to show you how I remove the paper and then what I do next to make sure that I don't have any of these kind of like flappy edges like this. Okay, so let me turn the camera around and give you a look. Okay, so when you start removing the papers, your flower will look something like this because you have already removed the center hexagon while you were actually doing your EPP. So I went ahead and I started taking these papers out. So if you glue basted, you just have to gently peel these back. And don't worry if you get some flappy edges like this, we're going to fix those. And as you start paper piecing, you'll kind of get the hang of, if you glue based, like just using just the right amount of glue. You don't want to use too much, you want to use enough to hold it, but if you use too much, it can make it hard to remove. Okay, so I pull that paper out, and there we go. I still have my flower, but I have all of these edges, which I obviously want to be a little bit more secured down. So I'm going to take my iron and I'm going to just gently press them down, making sure I have each corner folded how it was when I pieced it. And then I flip it over and I give it one more press on this side. Okay, so once you have your hexy flower all prepped, we're going to set that aside, and we're going to look next at this is the 6.5 by 6.5 inch squares that we cut back in week 1. So this is where we're going to be doing our applique, and we want this flower to be exactly in the center of this square when we sew it on. So we're going to be sewing 1/4 inch on each side. So it is a little bit tight. So we want to make sure if this is off-centered, your flower is going to be off-centered. So we want it right in the middle. So how we do that is we're going to fold this in half. And you can either use your iron, your finger. I have this little tool. Again, totally not necessary. I can link it, but it's definitely not necessary. It's like a little finger roller to just make a crease. Okay, so now we have a crease there, and then we're going to go the opposite direction and just make a crease. Okay, so now we know that that is the exact middle of our square. So when we take our hexagon, we want to put the middle of our center hexagon right on that point. And you can even, if you put it this way, you can even make sure that these lines line up with that crease. and that these, and it's kind of hard to see, but you can see that these lines line up with that crease. There are creases here that are right in the center of those hexagons. So next we want to put a pin here. Okay, so once you have your hexy flower pinned down, the next step is that we want to applique it on. So you're going to bring it over to your machine, and you are going to put it on, or I like to put it on the slowest setting, as speed setting as possible. And you start in the corner, and you're just going to stitch as close to the edge as you can without feeling like you're going to go off the edge. The reason you want to stitch close to the edge is because you need to tack all of this underneath fabric down. And if any of the seams are a little bit shorter than maybe 1/4 of an inch, you want to make sure that you're actually tacking them down. So I always think it looks neatest if you can get super close to the edge and just go all the way around as slow as you need to, getting as close to the corners as you can. I like to do it nice and slow, nice and relaxed. So let me take it over to my machine and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so I sew on a Bernina, so I have mine set to the slowest stitch possible. And I'm using a 1/4 inch foot, and what I'm doing is the inside part of the foot here, I am lining that up with the edge of my hexagon flower, and that's kind of what I'm using as my mark to guide myself through. So let me show you a little bit. When I get to that point, I lift up my presser foot and I spin. Press it back down, make sure that is lined up with that same side of the hexagon, and I go again. And I'm going to do that all the way around. Okay, so there you have it. You can remove your pin and snip any stray threads that you might have, and you are all set. You can see how that turned out, but I love it. So you can choose. What I will probably do is I will probably wait till I have all 6 of my hexagon flowers done, and then I'll do all the applique at once. But if you want to applique as you go, that's totally up to you. So this week we are doing 14 more 9-patch blocks, 1 more hexy flower block, and beginning to kind of experiment with this applique. So next week there will not be a video. I think I'm going to do an Instagram live, but stay tuned in the emails for more information on that.